Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today we're going to start a new project, and we're going to do what I consider a simple project that can be done in a short period of time, and it's all going to be made out of scrap material. So if you've got some scrap material, leather material laying around, this would be a good project. So come on in and let's get started. What we're going to be doing today is making a set of leather coasters. Now this is just a ceramic type coaster that I had laying around the house that I'm going to use as a pattern. But I rummaged through my bin of scrap, and I come up with these odd scrap pieces of leather that I had left over from larger projects. And then as I pulled them out of my bin, I just looked and see if I could actually make a coaster out of those. So if I could squeeze one out, then I set it aside, and I only need 4 pieces. I'm doing a set of 4. Then after we get those made, we'll make a strap for it so that we can strap them together and make them a set. These things are great for craft sales or gifts if you want to give to the family for a birthday or Christmas or something like that. It's a neat little gift. Now, we won't be staining these or dyeing these, but I am going to put a protectant leather sheen coating on them, so that'll help protect the leather from moisture as the coasters are being used. So it will darken the leather just a little bit, but I'm not actually going to use a dye on it. I'm going to leave them natural. So I've got a good sharp knife, I've got my pattern, I've got a good straight edge pen or pencil, I've got my beveling tool, and I've got my grooving tool. And then to finish it off, we're going to put some stamping on here. I've got some decorative stamps that we'll put on here, and I'll go through that when we get to that point. So the first thing we want to do is set all but one piece of leather aside. I'm going to turn this upside down because it does have a cork back on it to keep it from sliding, and I don't want my pattern lifted up off my leather, so I am going to turn it over so I have a good flat spot. Find me a good piece of that scrap leather, and then I'm just going to draw straight lines. I'm not going to try to go around a corner or anything because this ceramic one is a little bit rounded corner, and I'm not going to round the corners. I'm not going that far in depth with this project, but you can see now I have a pattern drawn out on this piece of leather. Move to my next one. Same thing. Make sure I can get a coaster out of that piece. Draw my straight lines all the way around. There's my second one. Move on to my third, and I didn't say that anything about that, but these pieces of leather that I picked out, I made sure they were all about the same thickness. This is 8 to 9 ounce leather, and I had some in there that was probably 10 or 11 that was like saddle skirting type material, so it's thicker. So I didn't want to mix and match those. I wanted to make sure they were all about the same thickness. So that's one thing I did too, is as I picked out my pieces of scrap for this project, tried to make sure they were as close to one another in thickness as I possibly could. There's my third one, and then draw out my fourth one. Now it does help to have a nice sharp knife or blade in your knife. There's the last one. What I'm going to do on this, I'm going to make this a 1-inch wide, or however wide this ruler is. That's how wide I'm going to make my strap, and I just found a piece long enough that I knew would go around 4 coasters. I tested it on some other ones that I had made to make sure it was long enough. You could use a string, you could use a piece of lace, leather lace, to measure it and see how big you're going to need it. You can wait till after you cut out your 4 and then measure it if you didn't have anything to go by. I'm just going to make this as long as I possibly can out of this piece of scrap using this ruler. And I know it's hard to see through my hand, my arm. So I'll cut that side off, and then you can turn it around. I'm just going to switch to my right hand. And notice I'm not going very fast. I want to make sure I'm very careful. Remember, I put a brand new blade in this, so it's super sharp. I don't have to push very hard. That just glides right through that leather. So there's my strap, the width of my ruler, and then all I'll do is I'll lay that on my grid, on my cutting mat, and square up the ends. Because when I'm done with those and I take my final measurement on this strap, then I'll round the ends off, and I'll know exactly where to cut them. Right now I'm just squaring up the ends, and that'll end up being my strap that goes around and holds the coasters together. So we'll set that aside for now. Take our straight edge, and notice I'm going to turn my straight edge over. I like having the cork side up, so just like the coaster, that way my straight edge lays nice and flat on my leather. And again, I'm going slow, steady. I'll turn it 90 degrees. And you want to try to make as square a cut as you possibly can. In other words, when you're pulling your knife towards you, you want to keep it nice and square. You don't want it turned to the right or the left. That way you get a nice square edge on your leather, and it's not beveled one way or the other. We're going to hit the top side of it with the beveler tool anyway, but we're not going to hit the back side. We're going to leave the back side nice and square. So you just keep turning it 90 degrees until you end up with one of your blanks. And that's the same size as our pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward a little bit and cut the other three out, and then I'll be back. Alright, so we've got all four of those cut out. We've got our strap cut, preliminarily cut, and as you can see, I ended up with quite a pile of scrap even after salvaging these four coasters out of that pile. So the next thing I'll do is take my beveling tool, and I'm going to bevel just the top four edges. Just to knock off that hard edge. And I did strop my beveling tool before I started with some jeweler's rouge. And again, you don't have to press hard or anything. This leather's fairly soft on the top, so. And I'll go to the next piece. And again, I'm just taking that corner off of it on that top layer. And I have found, seems like the harder the surface of the leather is, the easier it is to do the beveling. But you have to have a nice, sharp, polished tool also. And you have to kind of get used to how hard, how much pressure you're putting on it, because if you got a good sharp tool, it'll glide right across there and cut that leather off there and bevel it just fine without having to put a lot of pressure on it. Seems like if you put, the more pressure you put on it when you're beveling, the more it wants to kind of dig in to the edge or the leather, so you want to be careful with that. On to the last one. Now see, this one feels a little bit harder on the surface. See how much smoother that beveling cut is? I don't struggle as much as I push that down the edge of the leather. Doesn't want to sink down in the surface. So there's the four pieces are beveled. I can put my beveler up, and then I'll take my grooving tool, and I set it for about 1/4 of an inch, to go about 1/4 of an inch in from the edge. And I'm doing this real quick, real simple. All I'm doing is taking my beveling tool and I'm going straight down each edge, a 1/4 inch. I'm letting those beveling grooves, or those grooves that I'm putting in there, I'm letting those overlap. So I'm just making a straight groove on all 4 sides, same distance, and this is just for decorative. This is a decorative groove. This is not going to be stitched or anything like that. So there's one that's completed. And it'll also help me when I start to put the stamps on there. It'll help me as a guide as to where to place those stamps so that I get them even. And normally the way I've been making these is I do 4 stamps. I do 1 in each corner, and that tends to look the best. It's symmetrical. Here's one that I was practicing on, which is just a star stamp that I have, and I was just practicing there. But there's all kinds of stamps you can buy. They have different images on it. I have a wildlife set. I think I've got a bear and a deer and a fish, like a bass, and so there's all kinds of stamps that you can buy of images. And obviously you could buy a set of alphabet stamps. So if you wanted to put someone's first initial, their last name on it or something like that, that way you can kind of do some custom stuff with it. Alright, so those have been beveled, they've been grooved, all 4 of them. And you can see that doesn't really take a lot of time. Kind of get this out of my way here. And then I'm going to get my granite, my piece of granite, because I'll need that for the stamping. And then we'll need to case each one of these. I'm not going to put anything on this strap. I'm just going to leave it plain. You could stamp the strap. I've done that before, where I stamp my strap with the same image that I'm putting on the coasters. So you could do it either way. I'm not this time, so there's no need to case that piece of leather. So I'm moistening my sponge in my water, and again, this is just plain tap water. And you don't want to soak these, you just want to get them moist so that we can do some stamping on them. And we'll moisten that, and you can see they will change color as they get damp. They're going to get a little darker. And then once we've got those cased and we've got them damp, then we'll let those set for a few minutes. And what that does, we'll wait until it starts coming back to its natural color. Once it starts coming back to its natural color, that's when we know we can go ahead and stamp our image into the leather. Alright, so those have all been moistened. We can set that aside. let's go ahead while those are starting to come back to their natural color. We'll go ahead and pick out which stamp we're going to use. So we will need our mallet. And this is the stamping stud that goes into the stamps that I have. Let's see. I have a deer, a buck, deer head. I've got a 12 gauge shotgun shell stamp. I've got a bull skull stamp. I got a bear. And then I've got a bass or a trout stamp. Then I have some other stamps, like I've got the star. Now they're a little bit different. They're self-contained, so they have their own stud built into them. So I've got the star, I've got horseshoe, I've got several different things. I've got an acorn, a flower. I mean, I've got several different kinds. And I think on this one, since I'm actually going to have these on my table at the National NCOWS, National Congress of Old West Shooters Convention this year. So I'm going to go with the horseshoe and do this set with a horseshoe stamp. So these are coming back to color, and all I'm going to do is put a stamp of horseshoe in each corner, so all four corners, and then what I like to do is determine how I'm going to put that in there. Do I just want to put it, straight in all four corners? Do I want to put it at an angle? And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this at an angle in each corner with the open part of the horseshoe facing the center of the coaster. And I'll double check it. If you have to, make sure it's seated back down in there good before you hit it again. You don't want a double image. Or if you want to hit it twice without lifting it up, make sure you hold it down good and steady. Don't let it move on you. And then I'll show you. So there's the first one with the horseshoe stamps. You can see how I put them at an angle. And the horseshoe's open. You could do them any way you want. And then while they're moist from the casing, that's when I make sure that I maneuver them around after I stamp them to make sure they're nice and flat, because you want your coasters to be nice and flat. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp the other three, because I want them all to match since they're a set. So I've got that complete. Now what I want to do is take my strap that I cut out. I'll put all four of these on top of one another as the set. Then I'll put that on top of my strap, and I'll fold that over and measure my strap and see if I need to cut it. And it doesn't look like I need to cut it at all. So I got lucky on my strap. I do want to round that corner. So let me get a belt cutter here. I don't want to take any off in the length because it's just going to be about the right length that I need. So I want to be real careful about that. And you can see how much I took off. Just enough to make it a round corner. And that's what I end up getting. And those come in different sizes. I just bought a set of them. And several of them came in a set. And I believe I got that set off of Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. But you can get them at Tandy. So, cut that. Now I've got both ends rounded of my strap. So there's one end, there's the other end. I can set that scrap aside. Put my 4 coasters back on top of my strap. And I may need to stretch this strap as much as possible. It could have stood to been a little longer, but again, I'm using scrap pieces, so. And I'm going to take a stylus here and make a mark where I want to put my hole. I'm going to use a snap in here. So I'll punch my hole for my snap on that end. Then what I'll do is I'll put it back. Notice this is a lot of dry fitting or testing. I'll put it back and pull that nice and tight again. And once I have that good and tight, take my stylus and I'll make a mark on the other side through that hole that I just punched. That way I know it's going to fit perfect. I'll go ahead and punch that hole. Then I'll get me another piece of scrap here. And grab, sorry, reaching in front of you, I'm going to grab a set of snaps. And I think I'll go with the gold color. I need my setter. So I'll take my strap and then I'll look and make sure I have the right piece for the male and the female of my snap. Put that part up through the bottom. Put that piece on. And then I'll use the flat side of my setter . setting tool on there. And then I like to put those in there until they don't spin. And make sure I have a nice set in there and this doesn't spin on me. Now I'll take my other piece, fold it over, make sure I know I'm getting it on. You don't want to get it on there backwards. So make sure I know I'm getting my snap on the right side. Flip my setter over. Take my setting tool. Rolled it over nicely. Doesn't spin. Put my setting tools up. And then try it out and see if I can get it to snap and work properly. I'm sure you heard that snap. And there's my completed set. And that holds that in there snugly so they're not just going to fall out. And then when you want to use it, you pop the snap off. Now you have 4 coasters. So the last thing I'm going to do is put my Sheen Protectant on, and I am going to get a sponge these little cheap craft sponges like this. You don't need a very big piece, so I can get about 3 uses out of one that size just by cutting some of it off and only using that. So I'm only using about 1/3 of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to coat each one of these coasters with the Sheen. Then I'm going to coat the strap with the Sheen. I'll shake it up, and this is Fibing's Leather Sheen. It's the same company as I use their dye, Fibing's dye. I just prefer it. I like it. And I'll put a little bit of Sheen on my sponge, and then I'm going to work that into the leather. And again, it will darken it up a little bit. And that's okay. I just like to make sure it's coated really good down into the stamping and everything. And then we'll let that, push that one over to the side, and we'll go to the second one. So I get it down in to the groovings, down into the stampings, and make sure I have that coated really well. And yes, it does help if you wait from the casing from when you did your stamping. It would probably be better if you waited until that was dry before you put your Sheen on. But in this case, it was close to being dry, but because of videoing purposes, I wanted to go ahead and complete this project in one video. And it looks to be like a milky type substance, the sheen. I've found that it does a good job of protecting the leather, but it does put a nice finish on it. So I'll move to the fourth coaster. And notice I am hitting the edges. Protect those edges too. And then as it dries, if you want to go hit it lightly again with another light coat, I've done that several times. It seems to work pretty well. Never had a problem or issue with putting more on. Then I'll go ahead, I'll move to the strap. I'll do the same thing. And the only thing about the strap is you have to get around the snap. So make sure you get around the snap. It's not going to hurt the metal on the snap to get the sheen on it. It'll buff off when you buff your sheen on your leather. Now the strap shouldn't be getting wet with use, but I'm going to go ahead and hit the edges anyway. And you notice I'm not doing the underneath part, the rough side. I don't think it needs to be coated. Alright, I'll set the strap aside, go back to my coasters, double check them, set my sponge aside, and I take a microfiber cloth and I normally take the smoother side, and then I just buff the sheen on the leather. You want to make sure you get all the edge, all the way to the edge. Set that aside. Well, let me show you what it does to it. Look at that light reflect off of that. Look how shiny that leather becomes. And what it does as it dries, it becomes like a nice hard surface on there. So that'll help a lot with the moisture. You know, when you're setting cups with ice and beverages, especially cold beverages on there, if they sweat, that'll help with that. I'm not going to say that you're never going to get any rings or anything. It's still leather, but they do make great coasters. There's the second one. See that shine? So again, I'm using a microfiber towel. I'm using the smooth side of it, and I'm just buffing that. And the way I see it as I buff that, that's what hardens that surface and gives it that shine. There's the fourth coaster. And then I'll clean off the metal part of my snaps. where I got the sheen. I'll wipe that off. And again, it wipes off, buffs off. And then I'll do the same to the strap. You can see the shine that puts on there. So I can put this together. And there's my completed set of 4 coasters ready to give as a gift or sell at a craft fair, my website, whatever. So something quick, easy to do, using scrap material. The only thing that wasn't scrap was the snap, the hardware, that was it. So there's another project in the books. Fairly quick, easy to do. Turns out to be a nice project or a gift. And I thank you very much for coming and watching today. And next week we'll go ahead and start another new project. And come on and tune in to see what that's going to be. So thank you very much for coming along. And like I always say, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.